Peace, peace, peace. This is Eric the Man Scientist, True Knowledge. Coming with you with another presentation. You can follow me on Facebook, Eric the Mad Scientist or Eric Trueheart, Instagram, Trueheart30, TikTok, Eric the Mad Scientist. Um, also, I'm on my YouTube, Eric the Mad Scientist. Today, right here, what I'm doing is I got this thing called African spirituality fused with Islam and European Christianity created Afro Christianity. What do I mean by this? I'm showing how a lot of stuff in the black churches today comes from a lot of African spirituality that was basically snuck in through slavery and stuff like that. I speak on some of how Islam is in it, but I'm also gonna be speaking on other religious things that came from Africa that they do in like South America that has a lot of Christianity and Catholicism in it. Okay, so let's get started. This one right here, what I'm showing is other religions mixed with European, African, and Caribbean spirituality and religions. So y'all understand that a lot of this stuff got mixture up. It's not just one thing. So when you see a lot of stuff that's going on, like the dancing, the spiritual thing, feeling like they're catching the Holy Ghost, a lot of this stuff is African spirituality mixed in. So we will go to the origin of it. But first, we're gonna speak on these African, so-called African spiritualities, or some of the stuff that came from Africa that got mixed in with other things, and now people have their religion in like places like South America. Palo Mayombe. Palo Mayombe is an African, Afro-Cuban religion that originated in the Congo region of Africa. It is syncretic religion. It is a syncretic religion, meaning it's synchronized. Okay, meaning it combines African religion beliefs with Christianity. Palo Yambi is also as Regulus de Congo a Palo Monte, and some describe each of these as a separate manifestation of Santería. Palo Mayombe rituals and myths center on the spirit of the dead. The religion involves dark rituals that include human and animal remains, grave robbing and ritual dance, song and drumming. Palo Mayombe is practiced in extreme secrecy, and some practitioners acknowledge the religion's dark side. Palo Mayombe main worship involves religious receptacles and may contain earth sticks. Rare artifacts, animal and human remains follows each other. Palo Mayombe used to be used for good and evil. The former is referred to as uh, the Ganga Cristano, while the latter is referred to as a Nagango Judea. Okay, so like I said before, when we talk about these things, these spiritualities, voodoos, is also used for good and bad. So a lot of people thinking it's just bad, but it is. It can be used for bad or good, like the spells, rituals, things like that. All right. Umbanda. Umbanda is religion originated in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in 1920s. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in 1920s. It is combination of ideas and beliefs from the multiple cultures, including spiritualism, West African beliefs, Catholicism, the practice of indigenous South Americans, elements of Afro-Brazilian traditions like Candomblé. Candomblé. That's one of the other ones I'm gonna talk about. Occultism. Okay, Umbanda is spiritual incorporation tradition that first appears in a historical record in the early 20th century in a large city of southern Brazil, especially Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And Bande is based on spirits, both good and evil. The seven lands of Umbanda are Aluxas, Bombaras, Conductless, people of the East, Old Blacks, Cowboys, Seamen, and Bahamians. Okay, you see that? Now I already showed you two. There's different spirituality in South America that has Catholicism, Christianity, and the African spirituality and Caribbean. Okay, Zango religion. Zango is a religion in Recife, Brazil, that is a cult of Orexes, which are West African gods, Orishas, Orishas, which are West African gods. The religion is synchronized with the saints of Iberian popular Catholicism. Zango is considered a dirty religion that involves blood, sweat, and toil. The basic feature of the religion is slaughter of animals and chapels to feed the saints. During the slaughter, the faithful sing, dance, and experience trance. No ritual in Zango does not lead to or follow from animal sacrifice. Zango is also venerated through a dance pattern called the Aluja or Ronda de Zango, which demonstrates his conquest, power, and dominion. Kango is also the name of the powerful African god Shango, who is revered in the Orisha after his death. Shango is originally from the Yoruba people of Nigeria and Benin. Okay, so that's three I showed. Okay, let's go to the next one. Candomblé. Candomblé is an African Brazilian religion that developed in Brazil in the 19th century. It's a is syn, syn, syncretic syncretic religion, meaning it combines elements of several different religions, traditions. Cumbia is a combination of African beliefs, Roman Catholic art and visuals, and indigenous Brazilian elements. It's an example of the Portuguese slave trade, which began in the 16th century, combining African traditional religions with Portuguese Catholicism. Candomblé also has some influence from the religion of Yoruba, Bantu, and Gib. So again, I'm showing how not only the Black Christian in America, but all these other religions that was created in South America, stuff like that, in the south of America and the southern America, like the Caribbeans, are also a mixture of the colonized religions with the indigenous religions with the African religions. Okay, Santeria. Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean religion that originated in Cuba in the late 17th century. It's also known as the Regla Lacumi, like Regla de Acha or Lacumi. Okay, so, I mean, Santeria is another synchronized religion that combines Yoruba beliefs and traditions with some Roman Catholic elements and spiritualism. The name Santeria translates to the way of the saints in the Spanish. Santeria's four main forms of devotion are division, um, divination, sacrifice, spiritual, mediumship, initiation. In prison, the votes build altars with discarded cereal boxes and make sacrifice to apple, oranges, coffee, cigars, and pigeon feathers. About 7% of Cubans practice Santeria and other African based religion traditions. Voodoo. So let's see what voodoo is, okay? Voodoo is a religion that involves magic and communication with the spirits of the dead. It is influenced by traditional African religions that are common in the Caribbean and the southern United States. Voodoo has many forms, including Dominican voodoo, Synchronized religion that developed in Spanish Empire. Haitian voodoo, synchronized religion practiced in Haiti that combines ancient African religions with French Catholicism. Louisiana voodoo, a set of African-based spiritual folkways. Hoodoo, also known as Gula voodoo or Low Country voodoo. Voodoo is a monotheistic religion that recognizes the supreme spiritual entity or God. In Haiti, the God is known as Bandi, Bandi, which means good God. In Haitian Creole, in the Fawn, Bandu is called Mawu Lisa, and in the Yoruba, it's called Orolian, Olo Run, Olo Run. Okay, so now that we got the South American spiritualities, religions that you could clearly see has African spirituality, African spirituality, um, Caribbean, Catholicism, and Christianity. Now we gonna go to the Black Christianity that's in America and see what this is created of. If this has any other influence other than Christianity. All right, so we can go to the beginning. So right before they came off the boat, all right. Africans and African descendants working in the early modern Atlantic commercial system were exposed to the world of European Christianity as early as the 15th century. When the Portuguese missionaries came to the coast of Africa, some slaves therefore brought Christian beliefs with them when they were thrust into slavery. Others converted into America during the 17th century. Blacks in the Dutch, New Netherlands, and Spanish Florida baptized their children and were married to the church. And part of the participation in a dominant European religion reflected and helped to bring about a colonial society in which blacks were more fully integrated and enjoyed greater rights than later generations of slaves. So at the beginning, they were trying to get people to convert to these things, and they had better rights. Until later on, you know, it changed. But this is when they were talking about how Chris Columbus, how he went to South America trying to convert the people. If they didn't convert, they took over the place. They had the right to take over the place, the ladders. You know, you can go into that more deeper, but that's not what I'm trying to go into. I'm more going to this religion that was based off of it. All right. African Muslim Islam off the boat with them also. So this is talking about Islam, Christianity. So a lot of these people that was coming off the boat, some of them were Muslims, some of them were Christians, and a lot of them were African spiritually. A lot of them was still in their African spirituality that was already here before the colonizer brought Catholicism, Islam, and Christianity to them. Which Islam probably came before the European Catholicism and Christianity. With the African slave trade, the first sizable group of Muslims also came to America while slave trades um, statistics are fraught with imprecision, and the existence of Islam was frequently not recognized by those completing keeping data. It has been estimated that somewhere between 10% and 30% of the slaves brought to America between 1711 to 1808 were Muslim. They brought their practice of prayer, their fasting, and dietary practices, and their knowledge of Quran with them to America's shores. Balola Fula, for example, was a slave of the Sea Islands of Georgia in the late 18th and 19th centuries. According to all accounts, Balala gave his children Muslim names, wore fez and a long coat, spoke French, English, and Arabic, and was finally buried with his prayer rug and his Quran. Other early American Muslims whose accounts has been recorded into Salah Balali, a slave on a St. Simon's Island, Georgia, Omar Ibn Said, who left behind a autographical narrative. So again, they say about 10 to 30% from 1711 to the 1800s. A lot of them were Muslim, Islam, because we got to realize people don't never talks about the Islam slave trade that happened and would last 1,500 years before the European slave trade ever even happened. Okay. Africans forced into slavery in America brought with them a diverse range of African, polytheistic, and Muslim religious traditions. These traditions were often synchronized with one another and with Christianity in America. The diverse American religious traditions that trace their lineage back to religious traditions of Africa, slaves, and African immigrants played an important role in the fight for civil rights in the middle of the 20th century, and they continue to inform fights for civil rights and against injustice. So this right here is telling you when they first came, they started Muslim religion, Christianity religion, African spirituality. All these things got synchronized. Synchronized means what? Intertwined. For the young people, it's like you synchronize your phone, when you synchronize Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, all that stuff together. When you share something, it goes into all because they all synchronize to become one. Okay. African influence in the black churches today, African religion in America. The West Africans brought to North America carried with them a rich variety of African tradition, belief, and practice. But little is documented of the first 100 years of their religious lives here. Their original religious tradition respected the spiritual power of ancestors. They often worship a diverse pantheon of gods overseeing all aspects of daily life. The passage of seasons, the fertility of natural world, physical and spiritual health, and the success of community. Their religious life included initiation rites and naming rituals, folk tales, and healing practice, um, ecstatic dance, and song. This religious life clearly took new forms. The Africans were separated from one another and from their roots. Many scholars today will argue that the ring shout of early black Christians worship and development of African ecstatic dance traditions, and that the call and response rhythm of black preaching, hymnody, hymnody, and the gospel music has its roots in the song style of West Africa. So this is talking about the ring shouting. This is talking about how the preachers preach. A lot of this is based off of African spirituality traditions, okay, which got lost in it because it's going to explain to you how Africans had to sneak these things in during the period of time of slavery. And then when they got snuck in, it's kind of the history of it, how what happened became lost. So a lot of people think these things come from other things when they didn't. Okay. From the standpoint of America's ongoing encounter with religious difference, the institution of slavery played a tremendous role in shaping American religious life. It brought a African religious tradition, both West African tribal tradition, Islam, to American shores and created a crumble of oppression out of which rose new African American forms of Christian worship and expression. Slavery forced white Americans to rethink their own religious identity, struggling with the deepest dictates of their conscience and the practice of their churches. Many dominations split over the questions raised. So you know what this saying? This saying before they left Europe, it was a certain way of Christianity and Catholicism. When they brung it around, they took the people from Africa. There was Islam, African spirituality, and had certain Christianity, and brought them to America. They when they brought these other ways of how they celebrated these religions, it kind of had the European had to kind of change. It kind of made them. It kind of influenced their churches, and now you see them in churches what dancing. Some of them doing the shouting, some doing the Holy Spirit. But a lot of people tell you that it came from them and was pushed on us, but it wasn't. It's something they had to change. You'll see. Between enslaved people and Christian missionaries and other evangelists led to the spread of Christianity among black Americans. Many slave owners initially resisted these evangelists' effort partially out of concern that if enslaved people became Christians, they would see themselves as their own equals. By 1706, this fear of slave owners and the spurred legislation, legislation in at least six colonies declaring that an enslaved person's baptism did not entail their freedom. In addition, many enslaved people who did become Christians had to deal with restrictions by masters who forbade them from attending churches or prayer meetings to get around these restrictions and for alternatives to sermons by white clergy asking them to obey their owners. Many Christian enslaved people held secret services with a distinctive styles of praying, singing, and worship. These services were typically held in the cabins or in the nearby woods, gullies, ravens, or thickets. So this right here is explaining how they didn't want them really a part of the religion. Okay, so these people had to go what study, sneak and do these things, and they try to keep their own traditions of how they worshipped by using their own ancestral traditions, which was singing and dancing. Okay, and there's other times when they didn't want them to pray, they didn't want them to do certain things, they didn't want them to have that power of of the faith, because for them it was really dangerous. All right. At the point where history meets faith, African faith adapted to the new environment and illustrated the capacity of transforms the negative history of oppression. It was in the context of the plantation church that the content for hope and deliverance was born. What were the marks of the plantation church that provided hope in enslaved persons? According to Du Bois, there was a strong respect for nature worship and strong proclivities toward witchcraft. There were also a substantial number of enslaved persons who were Mohammedans. This means that in the making of black world, there was much hybridity, hybrid, hybridity and plurality as tenets of religions as diverse as Islam, Christianity, and African traditional faiths were fused together. The key was to present presence of African priests who saw the needs for equilibrium in the culture and practiced their art of religion. Voodoo, Abia, Santería is the blending of the sacred and the secular, finding the sacred of all things. In a position, African preacher, medicine practitioners to lead the charge against plantation life and the humanity of slavery. All right. Watch night services. Watch night services is rooted in African American religious traditions. During the first watch night, many enslaved African Americans gathered to pray, worship, and sing and dance. At the time, enslaved black people could find little respite from either um, present surveillance, even in the practicing of their faith. White enslavers feel that religion, which was often used to quell slave resistance, can incite the exact opposite of practice without observant observance. They wrote laws that restricted worship in a large gathering, such as the 1848 Georgia Slave Code. And I used to talk about that a while ago. Um, the Slave Code. All right, let's go. This picture right here is a black church ceremony, New Year's. When Jan D. Lloyd will take care of the colored folk, setting the old year out of the new year and sing in the colored church in Grafton, Yorktown, during the watch meeting. And I live by all these places from Virginia. Like I told you, I've been to Yorktown, been to Jamestown. I'm from Henrico, Glen Island. I lived in Richmond, been all the slave trails, been to slave trails all the way up to Fredericksburg. So I've been studying this stuff a long time. The first black president, Protestant denomination, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, was founded in the early 1800s by Richard Allen, who had brought the freedom from slavery. Allen had become a Methodist preacher in the 1780s, but in 1787, he and others left a predominantly white church after being pulled from their knees in prayer for being in a section of the church where black worshippers were not allowed. 3 decades later, he and the representatives from 5 other congregations founded the AME denomination, a similar chain of events in New York that led to the creation of AME Zion Church in 1821, the largest black Pentecostal denomination. The Church of God in Christ, formed in 1897, gained steam after the revival of Los Angeles, California, known as the Azusa Street Revival. Began in 1906. A revival led by a black preacher, Reverend William J. Seymour, is credited by scholars with spurring the growth of Pentecostalism in the United States and sequentially around the world. Africans becoming Protestants. So now we're going from, how the fight of them not wanting to be Christians, and then the Africans kind of taking the Christianity and mixing it with the African spirituality, doing it in secret to now they becoming part of these denominations and first times becoming Protestants. Uh, 2/3 of Black Americans were Protestant, like about 4 in 10 Americans overall. The relationship between Black Americans and Protestantism is usually due to the history of slavery and segregation, which spawned the creation of several black-led denominations that allow Black Americans to worship freely. Mostly founded prior to 1900, these historically Black Protestant denominations also supported colleges and helped Black communities in other ways. At the same time, Protestantism alone does not define the Black religious experience in the United States. Before enslaved people in America began converting to Protestantism in sizable numbers. During the 1700s, they commonly followed traditional West African religions or Islam. Catholicism, too, as long as a present um, presents among Black Americans, including in Maryland, Kentucky, Louisiana during the slave era. So again, it's telling you, even in that time, when they was becoming Protestantism, they still was mixing what synchronizing what West African religion, Islam, Catholicism, all this stuff was still being around, mixed in. Because all these slaves didn't come from the same background. All these people didn't come from the same background. Like I said, some were already Christian and Islam that came off the boat. Most of them was African spiritualism. And by the time they got to South America, a lot of them was into the um, Catholicism, Christianity was around, Islam was around. Then you got Caribbean religion around. Now you're going to up to South America. Now you're bringing that with you. Now you're going into things like Protestantism, and stuff like that. Okay, Hoodoo, Hoodoo in St. Louis, an African American religious tradition. The Hoodoo religion during slavery included religious practices from various African cultural groups, including the Odani religion of the Igbo people, the Yoruba and Vandu religions of Fan and Iwi people, and the Bantu Congo tradition in the Central Africa. All these African religions traditions blended and fused with Christianity on slave plantation, creating a unique spiritual tradition practiced by enslaved African Americans and their descendants after the Civil War. Many of these African religious practices survived in hoodoo and became a spiritual practice that continues in African American communities today. So a lot of these things that people are saying is not original in Africa. It's a part of an African spirituality. Bro, like hoodoo is not just an African spirituality. Voodoo is not just an African spirit. It's come from Vandu, which is from the Bantu people. But when it comes over here to the Haitian voodoo and the South American in America voodoo, it becomes mixed in with Catholicism, Christianity. See what I'm saying? So that's why I say it's more of a watered down. Not being disrespectful, but it's not the original. There's a difference because they had to try to keep whatever they could keep while they was getting converted into these other religions. So they had to try to keep what they could keep by putting it in and making it a part of it. So when so later on, now the modern people, or later on our people, we don't know that this is coming from this. That's why people are starting to see now that's leaving church or leaving voodoo or going to church. They're starting to say, "Hey, this stuff looks the same." Has the Holy Spirit dancing around, shouting, you know, doing stuff like that is the same thing. Drinking a man's blood, that's human sacrifice. That's a ritual. That's something that you're doing. All right. Hoodoo fusion Christianity in St. Louis. All right. Hoodoo, not to be confused with voodoo, is a spiritual religious tradition created by enslaved African Americans in the United States and inspired by Central and West African religious practice. The practice include herbal healing, veneration of African ancestors, counterclockwise circle dancing, ring shout, water immersion, sacred music, spiritual possession, divination, and using charms of spiritual protection against physical harm and conjure. Many of these Central and West African religious practices were brought to North America during the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans were often forced to become Christians upon arrival in North America. The synchronization of African practices with the Christian religion created hoodoo among enslaved African Americans. Slave codes did not allow large gatherings of free and enslaved blacks, and it was a crime for African Americans to practice traditions from Africa. As a result, some hoodoo practices were hidden in African American churches, creating a unique brand of Christianity that fused African traditions that was called Afro Christianity. Did y'all hear that? That's what I've been trying to show people. You say it again. As a result, some hoodoo practices were hidden in African American churches, creating a unique brand of Christianity that fused African traditions that was called Afro Christianity. Okay. The beginning of black American made groups. And see this is kind of what happened, right? Because when the churches was coming out and they was coming to the churches, they still had more of a African tradition, African way of thinking, African church here, African church here. They were still trying to keep a lot of the African spiritualities inside of these religions. So, oh, my bad. So now we could go into other groups who started expanding from that into things like Christianity, Morism, Nation of Islam, Asiaticism. Okay, historians say the biblical story of the Israelites' escape from Egypt provided a good deal of inspiration to the enslaved people. This was reflected in coded lyrics to some of their religious songs or spirituals. And Go Down Moses, for example, the lyrics played with the Hebrew prophet to tell old Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Frederick Douglass wrote that when he was a child, before he can escape slavery, had escaped slavery, a keen observer might have detected in our respected songs, "Old Canaan, sweet Canaan, I am bound from the land of Canaan," something more than a hope of reaching heaven. We met to reach to the north, and the north was our Canaan. So that's why a lot of people will say to you that we started becoming people of the Bible, people of this, people of that, because it resembled to us. Who else would it did resemble? So we started making our own Canaan and these secret messages. Like so, he said Canaan didn't mean the Canaan in the Bible at the time. It meant Canaan going to the north, going through the railroad, underground railroad, trying to escape. The turn of the century, the early 1900s saw the founding small non-Christian black religious organizations that urged black people to view themselves as Asiatic, Moorish, or as descendants of ancient Israelites, and that used religion to nurture the identity outside social, society, racial heresies. The Nation of Islam, which became the most prominent of the groups, was founded in 1930 in the Detroit by a man known as Wallace D. Farad. It taught that black people were the original and superior race and the white people were devils, resulting from the experiment designed by a black scientist. Then there was a black African movement, Marcus Garvey, while not a religious movement. Its leader, Garvey, urged black people to move to Africa to form a government, a nation of their own, strong enough to lend protection to the members of our race scattered all over the world. So a lot of people start going from non-Christianity into things like uh, this new Islam, the Nation of Islam made it, Israelite, the Moorish Science Temple, Pan Africanism. This when it started flipping around into the 1900s. When people start saying some people start saying you came from Israel. Some people start saying you was an Asiatic. Some people still was teaching the African thing. Some people, you know what I mean? So reviving culture through ring shouting. This is why I was talking about ring shouting because I wanted to show how this lady right here experienced it and how she wanted to know the influence that these other these other African spiritualities had on Christianity. Let's see what she said. The ring shout. What is it? It is an African spiritual tradition, many regard it as long as lost and forgotten, but it manifests today in the Black Baptist Church. But that manifests today in the Black Church and in the spirit that has been carried through Methodists and other Protestant churches and praise houses. All of these bear the history involved from the very first ring shouts the ancestors brought to the United States during the transatlantic slave trade used dance and music and copy mechanism. The original ring shows were a mix of rich cultural traditions, songs, and dances from various communities and mix designed to create a new community within the violent new world. In Cuba, Trinidad, Venezuela, Brazil, Colombia, Jamaica, these traditions were closely identified with the Orishas, divine spirits of nature, I was curious to understand why the ring shout culture had not been preserved in the United States in the same way that has been across other parts of African diaspora, where the same cultural and ethnic groups, ethnic groups were displaced during the during the Atlantic slave trade. Investing what we call the tradition of was practicing investigating what we call tradition that was practiced in the United States by other enslaved ancestors. I learned what we called it ring shout. I learned that over the years and through the force and indoctrination of Christianity, the ring shout tradition has drastically morphed and changed. So she's saying these things are more stronger and in the outer open and South American religions like the Santería and stuff like that. The way you can see it, you can understand that this comes from Africa. When you look at Christianity, it has been changed to a point where you kind of know it's coming from that, but it's hard to tell. It's not as out open. Uh, why is ring shout significant? It holds the memories of those who became before us. I am interested in understanding and preserving the songs and dances that my great great grandma would sing, move to. It's a shuffle of the feet, singing the arms, shoulders pulsing, and to see my grandma and mothers today, ring shout is blood memory. It's a time, simultaneously finds itself in the children of our mothers today. The spirit of ring shout is not only in the gospel churches of the United States South, but the same energy and the culture can be found in the shouting communities of Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, um, Barbados, and more. The memory holds thick. Recall every Sunday going and hearing the woman's feet patting on the wooden floor in the old hymns, as an adolescent. I began to study spiritual dances of the African diaspora, starting with dances of the Orishas. Later, I traveled to Brazil, Trinidad, Jamaica, Nigeria to continue studying these spiritual dances or movement prayers, as most practitioners would consider them, and reflecting on my own culture as an African American woman. I started to question why the spiritual dance forms of the enslaved people in the United States were not preserved in the same way as they have been in the areas of the Americas, as they have been throughout the Caribbean and Cuba, Brazil, and Haiti. When I traveled to Trinidad, I realized how similar the movement vocabulary and the patterns were in the Holy Ghost. Hold on, y'all ain't hear that. So what she said, and this is not a lady that just guessing. This is a lady that went to Nigeria, Jamaica, Trinidad, all these different places and studied the dances, studied the shoulder ring shouting, studying the historical African traditions that has been put into the South American Christian, I mean, religions and Christianity. Okay, she said, when I traveled to Trinidad, I realized how similar the movement, vocabulary, and pattern were to the Holy Ghost dancing that I observed as a young girl in my grandma's church. The shouting that occurs in Trinidad is closely aligned to the Yoruba Orisha, divine spirits, lineages. It also has influences of Christianity. This was my aha moment in finding the link. Okay, so my outro is to get y'all to understand that when we go to history, we got to understand history and we got to go through different sections. We can't just put everything in a ball and say Christian did this and Christian and then everybody became a Christian. And I understand that before these people were Christian, they were other things. And they tried to preserve their things when they became Christians. And a lot of things they do today in Christianity that wasn't accepted, and some still not accepted because it's not a Christian thing, it's not an original European Christian thing. It's an African spirituality that was put inside of Christianity. Okay, so I hope y'all enjoy. I'm gonna get some more stuff clean. I'm not under the weather, but I've been trying to do this for a minute. I'll try to do this on other shows, but you know When it's time for me to put stuff out, I'm just gonna put it out. 2024, I'm gonna be putting a lot of information out. So thank y'all for watching. Hope that shit was on. Hope that shit worked.